She's lucky to have A&E job with her intelligence.
Your intelligence got you $5,000 fine and public humiliation. Enjoy.
She walked into the courtroom wearing a designer pantsuit and carrying a leather portfolio, radiating the confidence of someone who'd spent decades intimidating people in boardrooms. When Judge Caprio asked her about the citation for verbal harassment of a parking enforcement officer, she laughed dismissively and said, "Your Honor, I was simply expressing my frustration. That officer was targeting me because of my vehicle. People need to learn their place." But what this corporate attorney didn't know was that her simple frustration would expose years of abusive behavior toward service workers, multiple complaints she'd managed to suppress, and a pattern of using her legal credentials to terrorize people who couldn't fight back. And when the judge discovered what she'd really been doing, that professional mask would crack completely. Before we show you exactly what happened when legal privilege met moral accountability, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. If you love Judge Caprio's sharp wit and unwavering defense of working people, please support our new channel Judge's Clapback by hitting that subscribe button and giving us a like. We're just starting this journey, and every subscription helps us bring you more powerful moments where arrogance meets its match. Your support means everything as we build this community together. Providence Municipal Court, Tuesday morning, November 5th, 10:15 a.m. The November chill had settled over Providence, but inside the courthouse, the heating system kept everything uncomfortably warm. Judge Frankcaprio was working through the morning docket when the bailiff called a case that made several court officers exchange knowing looks. Pemberton, Victoria. Citation, number 21-25, 2134. Verbal harassment and obstruction of a parking enforcement officer. The doors opened, and in walked Victoria Pemberton, 56 years old, looking every inch the senior partner at a prestigious law firm. Tailored Armani pantsuit in charcoal gray, Hermes scarf at her neck, Cartier watch, leather portfolio from Bottega Veneta. Her hair was cut in that expensive bob that looks effortless but requires weekly maintenance. Everything about her communicated success, power, and the absolute certainty that this would be resolved quickly. Behind her, looking significantly less confident, was a younger associate from her firm. Michael Chen, 29, fresh-faced and nervous, carrying a briefcase and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Victoria approached the podium with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd argued before appellate courts. She set down her portfolio with a sharp click and looked at Judge Caprio with the expression of a peer, not a defendant, an equal having an unfortunate conversation with another professional. Judge Caprio looked up from his paperwork. His expression was patient, but something in his eyes suggested he'd already read the case file carefully and wasn't pleased with what he'd found. "Good morning, Miss Pemberton. Please state your full name and occupation for the record." "Victoria Ann Pemberton, Your Honor. Senior partner at Whitmore, Pemberton and Associates. I specialize in corporate litigation." The title was delivered with emphasis, a subtle reminder of her credentials. "Thank you, Miss Pemberton. You're here regarding a citation for verbal harassment of a parking enforcement officer. On October 23rd, you were issued a parking ticket on Westminster Street. According to this report, you became verbally aggressive toward the officer who issued the citation. Is this accurate?" Victoria smiled, the kind of professional smile attorneys use to signal they're about to dismantle an argument. "Your Honor, I think harassment is an inflammatory characterization of what was simply a spirited disagreement. The officer was issuing a citation that I believed was unjustified. I expressed my opinion. I may have been emphatic, but I was well within my First Amendment rights." Judge Caprio glanced at the report. "The officer's account describes you as screaming profanities, making personal insults about my intelligence and competence, and threatening to have me fired." That sounds like more than a spirited disagreement. Victoria waved her hand dismissively. Your Honor, parking enforcement officers are public employees performing public duties. They're subject to criticism. If they can't handle robust feedback, they're in the wrong profession. The gallery stirred. A woman in a postal worker uniform leaned forward. An elderly man shook his head slowly. Judge Caprio's expression remained neutral, but something in his tone shifted. Ms. Pemberton, there's a difference between criticism and harassment. The officer states you followed her down the street for 2 blocks, continuing to yell. You allegedly called her an incompetent government drone and told her she was lucky to have a job picking on successful people. Does that sound like constructive criticism? I may have been upset, Your Honor. The citation was unjustified. I was parked in that spot for 7 minutes while I ran into my office to retrieve documents. The meter hadn't expired. She wrote the ticket anyway, clearly trying to meet some quota. Judge Caprio consulted the citation. According to this, you were parked in a loading zone, not a metered spot. Loading zones are for active loading and unloading only. Commercial vehicles. 7 minutes exceeds the maximum. Victoria's professional smile tightened. It was a technicality. I wasn't blocking anyone. The street was empty. She could have used discretion. Parking enforcement officers don't have unlimited discretion. They enforce the regulations. That's their job. And my job is to advocate zealously for my clients. Sometimes that means challenging unjust enforcement. Judge Caprio leaned back slightly. Ms. Pemberton, you weren't challenging enforcement. You were harassing a public employee who was doing her job. The officer is here today. Officer Maria Santos, please approach. A woman in a parking enforcement uniform stood from the gallery. She was 34 years old, petite, clearly nervous but determined. She walked to the witness area, and Victoria barely glanced at her, dismissive in her body language. Officer Santos, please describe what happened on October 23rd. Maria's voice was quiet but steady. I was working my route on Westminster Street around 2:30 p.m. I observed a black Lexus SUV parked in a loading zone. The vehicle had been there for at least 7 minutes based on my route timing. I began writing a citation. That's when Ms. Pemberton came out of a building. What happened next? She saw me writing the ticket and immediately started yelling. She said, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I explained she was parked illegally in a loading zone. She said I was a moron who didn't know how to read signs. She said people like me exist to harass successful people because we're jealous. The gallery reacted with quiet murmurs. Victoria sat, stone-faced, unmoved. Did she say anything else? Maria's voice wavered slightly. She said I was lucky to have any job at all with my level of intelligence. She said she was an attorney and would have me fired. She followed me down the street for 2 blocks, yelling the entire time. She took photos of me and my badge number and said she was reporting me to my supervisor for harassment. How did this make you feel? Humiliated, scared. I've been doing this job for 8 years. I've dealt with angry people before, but this was different. She wasn't just upset about a ticket. She wanted to hurt me, to make me feel small. Judge Caprio turned to Victoria. Ms. Pemberton, do you dispute Officer Santos's account? Victoria's tone was coolly professional. I dispute the characterization, Your Honor. I expressed legitimate frustration with what I perceived as overzealous enforcement. If Officer Santos felt insulted, that's unfortunate. But hurt feelings don't constitute harassment. You called her a moron. I may have used colorful language. Attorneys often speak forcefully when advocating their position. You weren't in a courtroom, Ms. Pemberton. You were on a public street, berating a woman for writing a parking ticket. A parking ticket I intend to challenge, which is my right. Judge Caprio picked up his phone. Bailiff Rodriguez, please pull any previous citations issued to Ms. Pemberton and any complaints filed against her with the parking authority. Victoria's professional composure flickered slightly. Your Honor, I don't see how past citations are relevant to this specific incident. I'll determine relevance. Please be patient. 20 minutes passed. The courtroom remained uncomfortably warm. Victoria sat rigid, her expensive watch catching the light. Officer Santos remained in the witness area, fidgeting with her badge. The gallery watched in silence. Bailiff Rodriguez returned with a thick file. Judge Caprio began reading, and his expression grew progressively darker. Ms. Pemberton, in the past 5 years, you've received 18 parking citations. 18. 11 were for parking in loading zones. 4 were for expired meters. 3 were for parking in handicapped spaces without a permit. Victoria's voice was dismissive. I work in downtown Providence. Parking is limited. Sometimes I make judgment calls about where I can briefly stop. Briefly. Some of these citations indicate your vehicle was parked for over an hour. My work involves unexpected delays, client calls, emergency meetings. I can't predict how long I'll need. Judge Caprio continued reading. What's more troubling is this. There are 7 formal complaints filed against you by parking enforcement officers. 7 different officers have reported verbally abusive behavior. One officer states you called her a glorified meter maid who peaked in high school. Another reports you said he was a waste of taxpayer money. A third says you threatened to sue her personally for harassment. The courtroom had gone completely silent. Victoria's face had flushed slightly, but her voice remained controlled. Your Honor, parking enforcement officers are sensitive. They take criticism personally. I may have been direct in expressing my frustration, but I never threatened anyone. You told one officer you would sue him personally. That's a threat, Ms. Pemberton. You used your position as an attorney to intimidate someone who makes $18 an hour writing parking tickets. I said if his behavior constituted harassment, legal action would be appropriate. That's not a threat. That's information. Judge Caprio set down the file and looked directly at Victoria. Ms. Pemberton, I want to show you something. He nodded to the bailiff, who set up a small monitor. Officer Santos wears a body camera as part of the parking enforcement program. This is footage from October 23rd. The video began to play. The audio was clear. Victoria's voice, loud and harsh. Are you stupid? Can you not read? I'm parked here for 5 minutes. Get a real job instead of harassing people who actually contribute to society. You're pathetic. What did you do to end up writing parking tickets? Flunk out of community college? Officer Santos on the video, calm and professional. Ma'am, I'm just doing my job. The citation is for... Victoria, screaming now. I don't care what your little ticket says. I'm a senior partner at a law firm. I bill $600 an hour. Do you understand what that means? 1 hour of my time is worth more than you make in 2 weeks. You're wasting my time because you need to meet your quota. The video continued for another minute. Victoria following Officer Santos down the street. More insults, more threats. Officer Santos never responding, just walking away, trying to do her job while being verbally assaulted. The courtroom was absolutely silent when the video ended. Several people in the gallery looked genuinely angry. The postal worker in the front row was shaking her head. Victoria sat frozen, staring at the blank screen. Judge Caprio spoke quietly. Ms. Pemberton, that wasn't spirited disagreement. That was abuse. Targeted, deliberate abuse of someone who was doing her job. Victoria's voice was quieter now. I was having a bad day. I just lost a major case. I was stressed. I shouldn't have spoken that way, but it was an isolated incident. Was it? Judge Caprio picked up the complaint file again. 7 officers, 18 citations, 5 years of pattern. Ms. Pemberton, you've spent half a decade treating parking enforcement officers like they're beneath you, like their job their dignity, their humanity doesn't matter because you bill $600 an hour. Your Honor, I've apologized. Officer Santos, I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. I was wrong to speak that way. Officer Santos looked at her, tears in her eyes. You're not sorry. You're sorry you got caught. Every day I go to work, wondering if today will be the day someone like you decides my job isn't important enough to deserve basic respect. Judge Caprio leaned forward. Ms. Pemberton, let me tell you something about Officer Santos that you clearly never bothered to learn. She has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. She wanted to be a police officer, but a medical condition disqualified her. So she took this job because she still wanted to serve her community. She works weekends. She covers holiday shifts. She does her job professionally, even when people like you treat her like garbage. He paused. And let me tell you something else. Officer Santos makes $38,000 a year. She has 2 children. She takes the bus to work because she can't afford parking downtown. And you, making $600 an hour, felt entitled to follow her down the street, screaming about how worthless she is. Victoria looked at the floor, unable to maintain eye contact. Ms. Pemberton, you're an attorney. You should understand better than anyone that all jobs in society matter. That parking enforcement exists because we need order. That the people who do these jobs deserve respect. But you don't believe that, do you? I respect people, Your Honor. No, you don't. You respect credentials, status, money. But a parking enforcement officer, a postal worker, a custodian? Those people are invisible to you until they inconvenience you, and then they become targets. Judge Caprio picked up his gavel. Here's what's going to happen. Your parking citation fine is $150. For the verbal harassment, I'm charging you $5,000 in fines. That's the maximum allowed for this offense. Victoria gasped. $5,000? Additionally, you're required to complete 100 hours of community service. Specifically, you'll shadow parking enforcement officers. You'll walk their routes, experience their job, see what it's like to be screamed at by people who think they're too important for rules. Your Honor, I'm a senior partner. I don't have time. You found time to follow Officer Santos for 2 blocks. You'll find time for this. If you fail to complete these hours, the citation becomes a criminal charge for obstruction of government function. Victoria's professional composure had completely shattered. Please, Your Honor, this will humiliate me. My colleagues will find out. My reputation. Your reputation should be built on character, not just credentials. Officer Santos's reputation is that of a hardworking public servant who treats everyone with respect. Your reputation is that of someone who abuses people she thinks can't fight back. Maybe this will help you rebuild the right kind of reputation. Judge Caprio turned to Officer Santos. Officer, I apologize on behalf of the court that you had to endure this. You perform a valuable service for this city, and you deserve to do it without being verbally assaulted. Maria nodded, unable to speak through tears. The gavel fell with a sharp crack. Victoria stood frozen, her expensive portfolio suddenly looking like a symbol of everything hollow about her success. As she turned to leave, Judge Caprio spoke once more. Ms. Pemberton, you told Officer Santos that 1 hour of your time is worth more than 2 weeks of hers. Let me correct that. Your time isn't worth anything if you spend it making other people miserable. Her time, spent serving her community with dignity, is priceless. Victoria left without responding, her young associate following nervously behind her. 3 months later, Victoria Pemberton completed her 100 hours of community service. She walked with parking enforcement officers through rain and heat and hostile confrontations. She saw firsthand what Officer Santos dealt with every day. The insults, the threats, the casual cruelty from people who thought parking tickets justified verbal abuse. Something in Victoria changed, Not overnight, but gradually. She started saying please and thank you to service workers. She stopped parking illegally. She left generous tips. She donated $50,000 to Providence's Public Employee Assistance Fund. 1 year later, Victoria ran into Officer Santos at a coffee shop. The two women looked at each other for a long moment. Then Victoria said quietly, "I've spent the past year trying to become someone worthy of your forgiveness. I know I'm not there yet, but I want you to know I'm trying." Maria studied her, then nodded. "Keep trying. That's all any of us can do." Judge Caprio kept the body camera footage in his files, a reminder that respect isn't determined by income or credentials, that every job serving the public has dignity, that attorneys who forget their humanity need to be reminded that the law exists to protect everyone, including parking enforcement officers making $38,000 a year. If you love Judge Caprio's fierce defense of working people and his sharp clapbacks to entitled behavior, please support Judge's Clapback by subscribing and hitting that like button. Your support helps us share these powerful moments where arrogance gets the reality check it deserves. What do you think? Should professionals who abuse service workers face public accountability? Should harassment of public employees carry serious penalties? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this story reminded you to treat everyone with respect, share it with someone who needs that reminder. Dramatization for storytelling and education, not legal advice or reporting.